Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We'll be engaging in vulnerable conversations every Friday to shine a light on what we've been through,
how it changed us, and what we learned. We want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding.
These conversations and the associated language can be triggering.
Listen at your own discretion.
But please reach out if we need to be doing something better.
So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome. Well, Tim, we've been talking about loss and things that can lead us into dark places quite a lot here lately. And we thought it was time we finally talked about something that happened to you a few years back.
Yeah. So the main concept behind what I think I want to get into is dealing with loss and grief. And to kind of talk about it, it would make more sense for me to start at the beginning rather than just jumping to my most recent one, I would think. Death and the loss of a loved one is something very difficult that a lot of people have dealt with, and I think even more people have not dealt with it. It's a very complex response that your body has whenever you lose somebody you love. And a lot of the times whenever we talk about grief and loss, most of the time you're thinking of like the death of a loved one, but you can grieve other things such as like the loss of a lover, as in like a breakup or the end of a relationship, such as a friendship as well. So I am no stranger to death. I've had the unfortunate experience of dealing with death since I was a kid. I had a baby sister who unfortunately did not live past a week. And that was my first run-in with death in my life. I was about 5 years old, 4 or 5 in that general area. My next run-in with death was when I lost my father, as I've talked about a couple times on here, at the age of 8. That was very difficult. I, at that point, had not lost somebody who has been a mainstay in my life. The loss of my baby sister was definitely traumatic to me as a child, but I guess it wasn't an experience where it was like I lost somebody who was there with me every single day versus when I lost my father, I had to learn how to live my life without having him there. Whenever my father had passed away, we had grown really close. My brother and I had grown really close to this individual who'd lived down the street from us. We called him like Grandpa Bob. He became, I wouldn't say like a surrogate father necessarily, but he became a very strong father-like figure in our lives. And I kind of hunted down for father figures throughout my life. And I believe we had a conversation with somebody the other day who had mentioned that they had done that before. Collecting father figures was their exact verbiage. So, yeah, and then I remember Bob had passed away. And I think that was a very devastating moment in my life. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward a couple years to 2018. I'm no stranger to loss, but it had been quite a while since I've actually lost anybody significant in my life. I was going through a really bad breakup. I did not handle the breakup very well at all. I don't really know why. I think at that time I was so focused on how I thought I was going to be alone for the rest of my life or something. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I was going through at the time. So I was kind of dealing with a little bit of grief in that area. And then I remember I woke up one morning. I was going to get ready for work. I was in like that half awake, half asleep stage. And I got a phone call from someone very close to me. And I remember ignoring the call at first, and then they called back. And I was like, what the heck? And I answered the phone. And the first thing that they had said was, and I'm not going to use real names here, I'm going to replace names. But they were like, Philip had shot George. And Philip was my friend's father, and George was my friend, right? And my first thought was like, what the heck? Like, is he okay? Like, what happened? And they were like, Philip shot George, and then Philip shot themselves. And I was so confused. I was like, well, how do you, like, what happened here? Like, are they in the hospital? What's going on? And then she said that they were both gone. And I wish I could explain that had hit me like a truck, like I had been floored immediately, but I wasn't. It was almost like I was in like this weird serenity floating stage, right? Almost like it didn't actually happen. But I knew it happened, but the gravity of the situation hadn't hit me. And I just said, okay, it's going to be okay. I said I needed to make a couple phone calls, and I hung up, and I immediately started notifying like all of our close friends. And even then, even after making the notifications and calling people, I say making notifications, but after like calling all of our friends and being like, hey, this is what happened, it still hadn't hit me. I still felt like, I'm in this weird floating like stage. And like, I know at the time I was trying to tell myself that, oh, you accepted this. It's okay. Like, you get it. It's fine. You've been here before. But grief, so everybody says that there's like 5 stages of grief. And I think for the most part, that's a pretty accurate depiction of it. But how you process those stages might not necessarily be in the order that people think. If the last stage of grief is supposedly acceptance, then why your body, I feel like, can accept it and then just go into denial and then anger, and then like it's a freaking mess, So I think in that instance, I had possibly just like jumped to the acceptance part, but not really. I don't know how to describe it.
That's textbook denial. Is okay, I hear the words, but I can't take this on board and process this because there's no way.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and that was the start of my very steep decline. I could not handle that grief. I think a lot of my grief, there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of, I should have done this, or why didn't I do this? I really couldn't face a lot of those emotions. George had been my friend since I lost my father, a little bit before I lost my father. So since I was like 7, George and I had been friends. But yeah, I don't know. It was literally like losing a part of myself.
I would definitely quantify it as such, because you guys had been friends forever. How old were you in 2018?
I was at the time 24, about to turn 25.
So your brain was finishing formation, and this person who'd been with you through every major crux in your life was no longer there, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't simple. It still isn't. So, my best friend, I can't imagine what that'd be like. Someone who's... We've been through so much together, but that's loss on a scale that is untenable. Could we take a minute to reflect on some of your favorite activities, or would that be too difficult?
Yeah, that sounds... I can talk about some of that stuff. I think that would be, therapeutic in a way. Talking about, like, memories and everything, like, we had known each other for so long. Him and I became friends in 3rd grade, which was right before my father had passed. And I'll be honest with you, like, most of my furthest reaching memories are back with him. I remember when we were kids, we always loved a lot of the same, like, cartoons and stuff. We'd always watch a lot of, like, Cartoon Network, like Billy and Mandy was a really big one. Ed, Edd and Eddie. It was like somebody took our sense of humor and put it on the television, and we based our entire personalities and our jokes around all that. So much fart jokes when we were kids. Insanity, yeah. We were really big into, I remember when I can't remember with the age, but we got really big into Transformers, like the actual toys and the cartoon and everything. So all we ever wanted to do was like get the Transformers, and we would try and see who can like transform them from robot to vehicle and back as fast as possible. And we would trade toys all the time. We would call each other all the time and talk about whatever, the most recent episode of whatever TV show we liked, or try and get plans for the weekend. Like, dude, you should come over and spend the night on Saturday, or I can come spend the night on Friday, and things like that. Going a little bit further into like our adult age, we both got into Dungeons and Dragons very heavily. And I think that was like the catalyst that made me bring my friend into our group. Because my friend, he didn't go to public school where all of us had met and hung out and everything. And I think Dungeons and Dragons was like the first time where it was like, hey, we should all get together. This is my friend. I mean, I think there was moments beforehand, but I can't remember it being like super extensive or us hanging out frequently. I mean, I could be remembering this wrong. I don't know. It's been so long. Damn near 20 years.
Yeah.
I think middle school time frame to early high school time frame, you guys had met him a couple times, and whenever he would hang out at my house, we would all be able to hang out. But yeah, so we got really big into like Dungeons and Dragons, and I mean, we were always really big into like video games and stuff like that too.
I remember you guys being fiends at RuneScape, man.
Yeah, there was definitely a time where RuneScape was like really a big thing in our lives, and I don't even have access to that account anymore. So just over a decade's worth of time wasted and thrown away, and I no longer have access to that. But yeah, like video games were really big, and then I remember kind of jumping around all over the place here, but we all had gotten a house together and like moved out and lived together for a little while, given that a go. And then my friend continued and got his own place with the girl he was seeing at the time, and we'd all go over there and hang out, and we would jump between hanging out at his house and going over to our other friend's house and then to my cousin's house, and we were all just bouncing around everywhere. But there was definitely a lot of issues, like the small things started popping up around this time. And alcohol was definitely like the thing that became really bad. My friend had started having a pretty big issue with alcohol. I couldn't even tell you when it actually started. It felt like one day it was there and the next day it was. And, I feel like I was supposed to talk about happy memories right there. And I think I just started going into negative.
Well, this is real life.
Yeah.
We were young men in the mid-Ohio Valley during the heart of the opioid epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things that had happened. My friend had always suffered from some kind of social anxiety or depression. Alcohol and marijuana became kind of big mainstays in our hangout group. We were young, and hanging out and drinking seemed like the fun thing to do. And, eventually the alcohol got replaced with marijuana for the most part. And then that went away and it became drinking again. And, at some point I had left for the Navy, and I would come back into town. And it's like every time I came back into town, it would be like a hoorah, like one big party, like, hey guys, I'm back, let's all hang out and drink. And then, it'd become more frequent, and it would be like, oh, now I'm visiting town like once a month or whatever it was. And, it'd be like every single time I come in, let's all hang out and drink. And as a kid, like as a young adult, 22, 23 years of age, I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. You don't really think about that kind of stuff. And then I felt like alcohol became, we talked about this with Forrest, we talked about this with Mike, we've talked about this with Nick. It's like alcohol helps you kind of get past like those social anxieties and helps you be somebody else, and you can kind of disassociate from who you are normally to who you are with alcohol. And, you know, there becomes like this weird dichotomy between normal me and party me. And
Yeah, it gives you the illusion of being someone else or not having to deal with your problems.
yeah, it just, there was a lot of problems that came from it, and definitely a lot of levels of alcohol dependency. And I just don't know where it started or, you know, where it was going, but there became very obvious issues over drinking way too much, needing to drink, not wanting to do anything unless we were drinking. It just became a really big problem. And I'm not really sure. I feel like I'm never going to get the answers that I would want surrounding my friend's death. But I don't know. I always jump back to the root of it all, and I feel like it's definitely have been alcohol. You know, I can't think of how anybody in a sober state of mind would ever think about shooting their child and then shooting themselves. You know, it was really difficult to deal with, and the answers I wanted and the justice I felt that needed to be served just couldn't be. And on top of that too, like I lost my best friend, but I also lost somebody that I had looked up to at that point as like a major father figure in my life. So I was dealing with grief on 3 different fronts. 1, the loss of my friend. 1, the loss of my father figure. And then 3, the loss of that trust in that relationship that I had had. It was a lot that came down. And when I say that initial processing of that emotion was very light and didn't feel like it, when it finally felt like it hit like I had just been spaghettified by a fucking black hole, dude. It was crushing, soul crushing. And it was impossible to deal with. I did the only thing I thought I could do, and that was just jump to alcohol. Something that had been able to numb so much in my life up until that point. I looked to numbing those incomprehensible emotions and feelings that I was having. And grief, man, grief is such a powerful emotion. It consumes you. Very much like how depression or anxiety, those are so powerful whenever it comes to like taking over your life and taking over how you're going to process and deal and go about your day to day. You know, I've dealt with social anxiety before, but nothing too crazy. But then once the alcohol intake started increasing, my social anxiety got worse. You know, how do I talk to people? How do I even handle talking to people? My depression, if I wasn't drunk, I was depressed. But when I'm drunk, I'm also depressed. So, you know, it's not like the alcohol made the emotions go away. It just made the memory of those emotions fade. It made it more difficult to remember being depressed. It made it more difficult to remember how I felt, which that's what alcohol does. It's a depressant. It's great at completely destroying your memory. It's a very powerful way to alter your life. What were you going to say?
I think it's very important that you emphasize how grief is a whole different type of emotion. Some other languages express that in a fairly concise way by saying, with sadness and stuff, they'll say, I'm experiencing sadness. I'm experiencing frustration. But whenever they sometimes talk about grief, it will be, grief is on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a pretty clear way to express that, you know, these other emotions, they feel like things that are outside us that we have to deal with. But grief is something that lives on us like a blanket.
Yeah, man. Grief, it's not, you can't describe it as just like another emotion. You know, it's impossible to just be like, grief is equal to my happiness or my whatever for the day. You know, like I woke up the other day and I was feeling exhausted and melancholical, but not grieving. It's an all-encompassing thing. It'll completely alter your it'll completely alter your perspective on everything.
It really feels like other emotions, it's like getting a phone call. Anger, sadness, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But grief is something you carry with you. It's always there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are kind of forced to grow around it and incorporate it into your conversation.
I love that you said you have to grow around it, because that's exactly what it is. Grief doesn't ever go away. It's there forever. You learn to live with it, and you eventually figure out how to continue growing without it. But it is always going to be there. That sadness, those painful feelings, those memories and everything, they're always going to be there. They're going to be around forever. That sent me into the biggest depression I'd ever been in my life. Years I had not processed this grief properly. And years I ran from it. It's life altering. I don't think I'd be on this podcast right now if I didn't go through that, because I wouldn't have changed my perspective. I think I might have been still a little bit of a shithead. I think. I think this accelerated my growth and my views on things. It's really hard to put into words what I'm trying to say, but it felt like the Tim before 2018 and the Tim now are two completely different people.
I would agree vehemently with that. Whenever a tree along a riverbank, whenever the bank slips away and the tree survives, that tree has to find a whole new way to balance, a whole new way to get nutrients. And I think that's a halfway decent metaphor that, you were growing beside this river and then the bank slid out from under you.
Yeah.
And another huge part of that I hadn't considered until you brought it up today was not only did you lose your friend and their father, who had been as close as a father figure can be, especially with as much time as you guys spent together and how integrated you guys were, but you lost that trust. And on a seismic level, I got upset whenever an old secco I had insulted my wife. And I was like, damn, I trusted that dude. I thought that was a good guy. And that is 0.0000 infinitely less than what you were experiencing in that moment.
Yeah, man. It was definitely something that, oh my God, I know for a fact a lot of my anger came from that. Dude, I suffered after the event. I remember I was having nightmares, and it was some of the most surreal shit I'd ever gone through. Dude, I remember this one nightmare. It was reoccurring. It happened so many times. But I remember it was my friend, and he was like telling me to come over because he was going to help me fix my car. And his father was like, yeah, dude, like I'll gladly help you fix your car, And he was always really good with cars. And I remember I used to always go to him for help with my car and everything, right? And, I remember like the dream would be like, it'd be like both of them being like, yeah, come on over, get your car fixed. Come on, we'll help you. Let's hang out. And then like the dream would always end with just like me outside their house, and like the windows would like flash and I'd hear gunshots. That dream happened a lot. I would remember waking up from that dream and just feeling absolutely empty. Like I had literally just had a piece of myself just ripped away every single time. And I'd be so angry, so angry. And the only way for me to process that anger and that depression and that sadness and that loss was to just drink. It was the only way that made sense to me. Because whenever I would drink, I'd be a happy person. I could have fun. That's what we did when we had fun. We drank.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's going to trigger your fight, flight, or freeze. And I don't think anyone would blame you from choosing flight. That's a beast. We talk about having to have the patience of wearing down the Himalayas with a piece of silk in meditation, but It's like going to battle with some titans the size of the Himalayas with a piece of silk. Who the fuck is gonna not look for a way out? What surprised you most about the grief that you were experiencing?
I think it was how all-encompassing it was. Like how big the grief felt. I have felt grief before. I knew how strong it was, and I knew how perspective altering it could be, but I never expected grief to be able to feel so massive. Like everything around me was this grief. Like everything around me was just a reminder of how I'm feeling. So all encompassing. And like, that's obviously from an outside in. I've had time removed away from the situation now, and I can kind of view it a little bit more in retrospective. But dude, like at the time, like it just felt like it was soul crushing. If you had talked to me about it at that time frame, and you probably have some memories of the conversation, like it felt just kind of like I was dealing with it day to day. And I think if you would have asked me then, it just would have been like, yeah, man, I'm just working through it, or something to that effect. But like looking back on it, like I was not working through shit. I was not dealing with anything. I was just completely like eyes half open, barely cognizant of what's going on around me. And that's not even talking about like when I was drunk. Like I'm just talking about normal. Like I'd go to work, and the only thing I could do is focus on whatever was in front of me. I would go out somewhere, and all I could do is focus on whatever was in front of me. Blinders on, nothing else. You know, I wasn't necessarily, I won't say I wasn't dealing with it, because in some way, shape, or form, my mind was learning how to grow around the grief. But I definitely wasn't actively dealing with it.
Well, if you were a tree struck by lightning, you were still trying to feed water to that part of the tree. And at that time, that was what you were saying. You were saying, I'm working through it. It's hard, but, you know.
Mm-hmm.
My next question would be, what did help? And once you started opening your aperture and seeing that there was a lot more to it, or do you want to walk us through some more chronologically?
I think the next logical step would be to talk about when things started getting arguably better. One massive thing was a major change in life, right? Like I went from living in Virginia to living in Italy. So now we're talking about approximately almost 2 years, more like a year and a half after I lost my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
The short answer to it would be time. Like I said, I wasn't actively getting better. I wasn't actively doing anything to help myself. But my body passively trying to grow around this essentially led to me just feeling a little bit better each day. Slightly. Very, very minuscule. Everything around me had changed. My location had changed. The people I knew changed. My job had changed. You know, so much stuff had changed that it was a little bit better. I still was drinking pretty heavily, but I had like a newfound, I guess, mentality about it. You know, instead of like every single day drinking, like it would just be like, well, if I drink, I can't be doing anything the next day, like not working. So I wouldn't drink the night before work anymore. I wouldn't drink after I got home from work unless I was off the next day. So the drinking decreased in frequency, which helped. It helped a lot, because then I was able to start being more present for a lot more times. Yeah, more conscious, definitely. And I also had a budding relationship with a wonderful woman named Brittany at the time.
What's her name now?
Brittany.
Oh, yeah.
My wife, though. But yeah, so that was our relationship had started not too long after my time moving to Italy, which really pushed me to want to, you know, not be drunk anytime I was talking to her on the phone. And we talked a lot on the phone. I mean, there were still times when I would get drunk and, you know, I would hide it and do the best I could to make sure she didn't know I was completely wasted. But, you know, there was a lot of things that were changing in my life in a lot of ways that could help me deal with the grief. But yeah, I would say time was the biggest factor here, because let's say after my best friend had passed, within a month or two afterwards, if I had moved to Italy and met Brittany and all that good stuff, I still don't think it would have had such a massive impact on me at the time. I think I was too stuck in the grief in order to actually start feeling any type of better, any way better. You know, it was almost like the perfect storm in a way, where enough time had passed and enough things were happening in my life that I was willing and accepting to allow those things to happen. You know, like meeting Brittany, that was one thing that was like, okay, cool. Like, I think I'm okay with developing a relationship with somebody now, because there was a time frame where I just didn't want to deal with anybody. I didn't want to have a close relationship. I mean, I had my friends still, you know, you guys, but
You were keeping us at arm's length too.
yeah, absolutely. I didn't want anybody else to get close into my relation. I didn't want anybody else to have a close relationship with me. I wasn't willing to accept anybody new. I was definitely like lashing out too. Like a lot of that frustration and anger I would take out at work. Plus, on top of that, like I was poisoning my body constantly with alcohol. So, you know, there was definitely some like, I'm dehydrated and I'm angry. And nicotine, just lots and lots of freaking nicotine, dude. Without that much time in between, my brain was not in a position of even considering healing or allowing anything to start helping me heal and move on. 100% clarity and transparency here. I 100% needed help. I needed a professional. I needed somebody. I should have been in therapy. I should have probably been on some medication. I definitely needed that stuff then, but I wasn't going to get it. I wasn't going to seek it out.
Do you want to talk at all about treatment or things that you did to address it? I mean, now that you're in a new space and a new time, has there been a tool that's really helped you be able to look back and process?
Nothing that's like clinically. One really important tool that I have is Brittany, right? She has been by far and away my largest and best support system. I've talked with her a couple times about it. She knows pretty much anything there is to know about the situation. I still don't talk about it a lot, and that's why I haven't really mentioned it too much on the podcast. But I do find that talking about it each time does make it a little bit easier. But yeah, in regards to like therapy or anything along those lines, like my anxiety had gotten really bad over the years. You know, constantly in a state of worrying that something bad was going to happen. And it just got worse and worse and worse. So I did get on some medications. That has helped a lot. That's helped me really dull my emotions, which has been kind of a godsend for me, because I feel like my emotions are so sharp all the time. I've significantly reduced how much alcohol I put into my body. I don't really drink all that much anymore. I haven't 100% stopped drinking. I still have like a few drinks a month, but nothing compared to what I used to do. I don't know, man. Truth be told, like if anybody else was in my situation at that time, I would heavily recommend that they at least try and talk to a counselor, at least try and talk to somebody, because that's going to be the best tool that they have. They have to be able to express those emotions in some way, shape, or form. If you bottle them up, you're going to find yourself drinking a bottle, because those emotions are too much to keep inside. They're going to completely take over everything. They're very heavy. I also have another form of an outlet nowadays, and that's the podcast. We've been at this now for almost a year, and I have found that it's been a very therapeutic way to open up, be vulnerable, talk about my emotions, hear people's stories and how they've come through the other side of their Shawshank Mile. It's been very therapeutic. It's helped a lot, I think.
So both of those solutions are talking about it. I would recommend, if someone's experiencing grief and they don't have another human being there to connect with, I think journaling could be a fairly decent substitute. Again, I'm not a professional, but just getting those thoughts and those feelings out of your head and out of your body and onto the page, I think would really, really benefit. Hopefully, if someone's experiencing grief, they're listening to this, because if they come and press play, they're more likely to listen versus us going to them. Because anytime we came to you and said, hey, Tim, we think this is a problem, we think these might be solutions, you're like, nah, man, I got it.
Oh, I didn't want to hear any of it.
Exactly.
You couldn't tell me.
I've been working very hard on listening, and I've been learning about the solution versus arguments is getting on the same team. And the easiest way I've found is to appeal to the other person as another human being. So I'm trying to integrate those things to this conversation on how I could have reached you back then. I'm trying to think of some solution.
Well, you did have a very ingenious, I wouldn't call it like a master plan or anything, but you did have a very helpful tactic that ended up being pretty fruitful. So at the time, if I wasn't willing to connect with a person, or I started keeping everybody at arm's length, like you had said, right, which I agree with, then the next best thing to connect with was a beautiful puppers named Charlie. I remember you were about to get stationed somewhere where you couldn't bring her, and she desperately needed a house, somewhere to stay. Unfortunately, your first choice wasn't seeming to pan out, and your second choice didn't seem to be the greatest of options. So you settled on happy number 3, which ended up being me. And somehow, some way, Charles and I got along really well. I mean, I loved her to death, dude. She's absolutely a beautiful doggy, a wonderful companion for sure.
She's the sweetest.
Yeah, she's spectacular. Luckily enough, the person I was living with at the time said that they were okay with me bringing her. And yeah, I connected with her a lot. She was my companion, my whatever the hell Dritz's panther is called. I can't remember off the top of my head. Begins with a G.
Guinevere.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, wow. That was a deep cut. Deep cut right there. But yeah, you know, she was my companion. She was there for me. I could talk to her, and yeah, she couldn't talk back because she's a doggo, but she'd listen. And I think that was probably the best thing you could have done for me at that time, because I had a purpose, which was to take care of Charlie. And it didn't stop me from drinking and consuming myself with alcohol, but it did give me a purpose. And I'll be honest with you, dude, I don't think there was any, and just like going off of who I am and everything, like unless you physically showed up at my house and like beat me down into submission to get help, I probably wasn't going to do anything. Nobody could tell me anything at that time. I couldn't even tell myself anything, dude. I'd wake up and be like, dude, I can't keep doing this. I need to do something. I need to get better. I need to talk to somebody about it. And then that exact same day, I'd be like, chug, 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 chug. Better. But not really better. But obviously, you know, suggestions, any kind of advice, nothing was reaching me. My ears were deaf to all of it. So I do think that you had done a wonderful thing by letting me take care of Charles.
So what had happened was I was going to Poland. I was looking at housing solutions for my dog, Charlie, because I was going to be in Poland and could not bring her. And so we tried a couple simple solutions, which ended up being untenable. And thanks to the law of attraction, and speaking with Damon and some other of our friends, I said, hey man, I think if I give Tim Charlie, then at least he'll need to wake up in the morning. At least he'll have to be able to get out of bed and walk Charlie. Or he'll have to come home at night or have a plan for getting home so that he can look after my dog. Because there's no way that the sweetheart that is Tim is not going to take an old lady out to pee a couple times a day. So we gave you Chuck. And yeah, slowly but surely, it felt to us like you were being more cognizant, more conscious, more communicative. And then we had to figure out an interim plan for a few months while I got extended in Poland and you got stationed in Italy. But
yeah,
I saw how much you love Charlie because she went from 60 pounds to 80 pounds. But
Never gonna forget that.
I'm so grateful for that,
Yeah.
because then when I came back from Poland and I was going through my own things, I gotta walk Charlie. I had to get out of bed at least 3 times a day.
You had to run Charlie.
Yeah, even walking around the block 3 times a day, she lost that weight quick.
Thank God.
Especially, she went to Dad's in the interim, and so she was just running around in the woods, being a
Yeah.
wild animal. That helped a considerable amount. So what do you do now when the grief comes back?
It's a great question because I already said it, but it never goes away, right? So that means I still deal with it to this day, but it doesn't hit the way it used to. I look more fondly on my conversations when I talk about my friend in a more positive way, more so remembering like the love that I had in those moments. Like it feels different now, it's still there, but I can look on those memories more fondly. I can't say that I'm excited to talk about some of those past memories, but now I say them a lot more candidly. Actually, just this morning when I was cooking breakfast for Brittany and I was telling, I don't remember what it was. It was some dumb joke that I had remembered from a cartoon from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And I had mentioned it. And I was like, yeah, me and my friend would watch that show all the time when we were kids. It definitely shaped our personalities and our sense of humor. But it was just such a candid comment, and it just happened. And, I didn't feel sad that I had mentioned their name or said anything about it. A part of me, I just remembered it, and I loved it. I was kind of like, those are good times. But yeah, there are still moments where I still have like a dream, occasional dream or so. And I the dreams are always really strange, but I find myself waking from those dreams, embracing the moment that I have, what I have, my love, my family. And I think that helps a lot. I don't feel as empty or empty at all. I feel full. I feel full of love. I feel full of passion and compassion and everything around me. It's different now. I feel like I'm wearing a suit of armor with a sword facing down a dragon rather than a 3-year-old with a stick facing down a mountain.
Yeah.
I feel like it's definitely a hard fight, but it's a lot more reasonable, and I have the right tools to deal with it.
That sounds... The only word I can think of is transformative. Instead of having this anger and sadness, you were able, through hell and high water, transform it into love and compassion. And I hope one day to have achieved 1/10 of what you have there, because that is seriously impressive. On a lot of our shows, you've minimized your expertise, but you've been somewhere I have not. And what you've done there is truly impressive and inspiring. I'm the same as you. I wish I could have done anything to prevent any of that, but what you made out of it is just incredibly impressive. Where you are, who you are. Shit, if someone says there's no way, look at Tim, man. Tim found the way, and that's integration.
Yeah, I do agree with you, man. And thank you. It's so easy to just be like, I didn't do anything, or time heals all wounds and things of that nature. It's true. And it is a little cliche, I think, to say it. But over time, when it comes to something as strong as grief, it really will take just small things that will eventually transform how you're feeling into something else. Eventually, your brain will be able to process it, but it's not going to be immediate. You're not going to want to take the time. You're not going to want to have the patience. You're going to be angry. You're going to be upset. But there's always that voice in the back of your head that says it's going to be okay eventually, but it's going to be okay. And every day that voice gets a little bit louder and louder and louder. So if anybody is suffering through grief or any of those unpleasant emotions or very strong emotions, you have the strength in you to deal with it. It's difficult, but you can do it. And if you do need somebody to talk to, you can always just reach out to us. Quite clearly, Aaron and I have experienced things in our life that, puts us on the same playing field as everybody else. And if you feel like you don't have somebody close to you that you can talk to, just talk to us. Reach out to us.
Please.
Hell, if you feel like the light in your life has been drained away because somebody else has taken your light, come on our show. Come shine your light.
It's there. It's still there. People can throw a blanket over it. The universe itself has some pretty powerful blankets. But the light's still there. Sometimes you just have to shake the flashlight. So, Tim, I would love to end this on a high note.
Yeah. I think this is a good spot.
Yeah. I remember when this first happened, we wanted to do something for our friend once a year. And I think we've changed that pretty radically into doing something every week to honor that memory. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, dude. I will say that is one of my biggest driving forces for doing this show. And every single time we sit down to record, that's always in my mind. And I know it's in yours too. He was a very close friend of both of us. And we loved him. And I think this is a phenomenal way for us to honor his memory.
Well, Tim, thank you for reminding me about that light.
A huge thank you to all of you for listening.
This has been Aaron.
And Tim.
Massive shout out to Hyland Markle for the original music.
Share this episode with somebody who could benefit from it.
Let us know what you want to hear our take on.
Or message us to collab, or just talk.
All pertinent links can be found in the episode description. Message us if you need us.
Be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace.
Legal disclaimer. Our podcast is for entertainment purposes and cannot be substituted for professional medical advice.
If you need help now, please call 911 or 988 for immediate intervention.
Talk soon, family.